iTestify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us on iTestify. Today we are interviewing Angie David, who is the Health Director of the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists, right?
Yes.
I had to practice that. I'm so glad that you're here. Tell us a little bit about your journey, because I believe that you have been in Loma Linda for quite some time. You were a student there, you helped out in ministries, so tell us about your journey.
That's right. Yes, I was here at Loma Linda for 5 years. It seems like a century ago now, but it really wasn't that long ago. As a student at the School of Public Health. So I was doing my doctorate there, and it was an unexpectedly wonderful experience. The entire time here, I was able to get involved with some student groups here on campus, with Advent Hope, where I met Reed and some others, and Restoration, which is going on right now, and really to develop spiritually as I was growing academically and intellectually. So it was an incredible experience here to be here and really sense that God had a plan for my life. And I would say that my time here, I really felt in a very special way that He was directing me into certain roles and into certain positions in these student-led groups, which I was not expecting.
So you got involved in Advent Hope, which is the Sabbath school of the Loma Linda University Church, and then also in Restoration, which is an evangelistic series of Advent Hope. Well, now it is connected. So you find yourself really involved and participating. I actually in a similar boat as you, and it is just it is a unique spiritual experience, and it really, like you said, I think it develops and hones your faith in the Lord.
It really does. You have to depend so much on God to get some of those things done.
Yeah.
You know, as students, or you're working with students, many of your volunteers are students, and so you're depending on them to get certain things accomplished for the event, but they're so busy in their classwork, in their personal lives, you know, trying to maintain their own spiritual health as well. It's a real struggle.
Yeah, and those are completely volunteer-based ministries.
Yes.
And it's amazing the fact that I think God has led in them as well, but that dependence upon Him definitely is something that I'm personally experiencing right now as well. Yeah.
Yes, and it's a very trying place to be.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, and yet the rewards are amazing.
Agreed.
We may not feel it at the time, but we really see looking back, and I can see now why God put me into those positions. They were never leadership roles that I wanted. It was not something that I really felt like was my calling, but when God called me to it, and I said, okay, if you really want me to, I can see now how He was preparing me in those ways for where I am today. And it's interesting because it was a pretty circuitous route to get to where I am today. Because after I left Loma Linda, I went to Southern University and I studied at their Bible Worker Training Program, the SALT program. And from there, I had no idea where I was going to be. But then I went to Kettering Medical Center to do my dietetics internship so I could finish up my schooling to become a registered dietitian, and I didn't know where I was going to go after that. I ended up being called to Guam, of all places. I had no idea where it was until I got there, but on the other side of the planet, pretty much from where we are. And all of these steps in my journey were really developing different skills that I can see today in my position, how they've all come together. And it's really been an amazing experience in hindsight to see that now.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
How long did you spend in Guam?
I was there for 2 years.
Wow.
So working at the Seventh-day Adventist clinic there on Guam as a dietitian and as the wellness center director. So doing a lot of health education classes, also patient counseling. And then I got into administration as well. And I don't know how that happened, but again, into leadership position that I wasn't anticipating. But again, learning skills and learning about the healthcare system and how insurance works and all of these details that, again, today in my position now, I can actually communicate with our health systems in a way that we can understand each other, the struggles that we face and that are we have to take care of when we're dealing with these kind of situations. It's just so complex, and having had those experiences, I can at least understand a little bit, I hope.
So after going to Guam, you were there at administrative level, working as a dietitian, and then you were called to the NAD.
Yes, that's right.
And obviously you're not expecting that to work as the health ministries director. Did you already kind of know what that position did? What does it do? What do you do for the NAD?
Well, it's a very broad position, actually. You
Many
have to
hats.
be. It is many hats, and the reason is because the work of health ministry within the Seventh-day Adventist Church is so broad. There are so many different organizations and entities involved. There are church members. Some of them are not necessarily trained health professionals, but they are doing health ministry in some way. Of course, we have our hospitals and our clinics that are also ministering to the health needs of communities. We have other organizations, volunteers, and dedicated members of the church who are doing what they can. So it's incredibly broad. And then on top of all of that, we have the U.S. government, who's very interested in what the church is doing in this area. In fact, they've told me, we love what you all are doing.
What are we
Please
doing?
tell us more. Well, okay. Some of the things we're doing is we have an addiction recovery program. It's a 12-step recovery program, but it has a Christian focus. So we bring Christ back into the equation, acknowledging that he is the one who sets us free from our addictions, and he can give us complete recovery. And so we have a program that any church member can run at their church, at a school. Even some hospitals are looking into it, and they can help support members of the community going through addiction recovery. The interesting thing is, you know, we have even in our own church, many of our own members are struggling with addictions. And we're not necessarily just talking about alcohol or smoking, but addiction to gambling, addiction to even pornography is a huge issue today, or even addiction to shopping,
Social media.
you know, social media,
Food.
food. These are all out there, but we don't necessarily recognize them as addictions.
Why do you think then, because I feel these are maybe sometimes taboo subjects that people just don't want to talk about if you're in a Christian environment. Why do you think that that's a taboo subject? And is your addiction recovery program changing that?
It certainly is one of our goals, to change the taboos, to reduce the stigmas, to acknowledge the fact that really we all have brokenness in our lives. And I think it's very difficult for us as Christians to admit to the fact that we're struggling with something, because, you know, I have Jesus in my life. I'm not supposed to. He's supposed to just wipe everything clean and make everything okay. But, you know, and he certainly can and does do that, but we have to recognize that he also works with us through a process. And each person is going to have a different experience, a different journey, but the fact of the matter is that he does promise us complete victory. Now, we may experience that victory here on earth. For some people, he may reserve that victory for later on.
Yeah.
We just don't know what story he is painting for each one of us. So I think that as a church family, we need to acknowledge the brokenness in ourselves as well as in each other, and recognize that we're really here to help each other and not to prevent each other from finding that healing that we all desperately need.
I think it's important what you said about the fact that it's a process with him, because the part of the process with the Lord and the breaking of the bad habit to form a new habit is part of his glory and part of why you get to love him to the extent that you do, is going through that process. It can't just be a twinkle of an eye and one moment.
Yeah.
That's right. And even if he does, you know, you'll hear stories about, oh, I prayed and God took my craving for cigarettes away immediately. Now those happen. They're a lot more rare,
Yes.
I think. They're a lot more exciting to hear, so we hear those stories more often. But even in those cases, you know, those individuals still have to be careful that if they ever take a puff again, they may be back. And so, yes, God can give us immediate victory, but he does have to work through this broken body that we have because of the results of sin. And in that process, he is bringing us restoration and bringing us healing and bringing us to a place where we're actually depending on him. And I think this is a really important key, that we're not trying to do it on our own strength, in our own power, because that can last only so long.
Right.
So true.
Yeah.
I know sometimes it's difficult to struggle through certain things and not understand why we're going through it, especially when you do try and you're trying to figure out on your own how to get there. And I feel like sometimes until I surrender, I'm not ever going to get there. And so I'm actually hurting myself by trying so hard to fix myself, to change my situation. So it's kind of a beautiful journey to go through, learning that God actually has a better plan than you ever can imagine for yourself.
Yeah.
So Angie, besides addiction, I mean, that's definitely something I can see the government paying attention to. Addiction therapies, probably pretty popular as far. But what other things is the Health Ministries Department doing that you want to share about?
We also have an association for faith community nursing. Now, faith community nursing is something that not too many people know about, although it's been around for quite a long time. And it's actually a specialty of the nursing profession. And they are trained to work within a church or another faith community and to work with those members and also the community around there, but to help them on their own healing journey. So we have a wonderful faith community nurse in one of our churches in Maryland who actually keeps her pastor accountable about his health exams and making sure that he's getting his checkups. And if he has a question on what a lab result means, she will help him understand that. She does health screenings at the church once a month, so checking blood pressures and simple things. And if any of the church member has something that needs to be checked on, she can let them know and make them aware. She can be there whenever they're needed. She also goes on home visits. She does grief support. So this specialty is a really wonderful way for someone in the nursing profession to use their skills to help their church community. And it's something that we're looking to really grow and get more of our faith community nurses working within our churches. Yeah. So another thing that we do, of course, is we have a lot of different training programs. So I'm in the process right now of scheduling our Health Summit, which is a huge event where we will do a variety of different trainings for anyone who wants to come. We want health professionals, students, also church members, pastors. So you can come there and learn different skills in different areas of health ministry to share at your church. And speaking of students, I actually just came back from Canada at Burman University a couple weeks ago, where we had a program called CABLE, which is Collegiate Advocates for Better Living. And we actually give a scholarship to students at our Adventist universities to be the health advocate on their campus. So we're engaging young people during their college years to get involved in health ministry. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. Especially because health is one of those things that perhaps as a student that gets left behind for other priorities.
Yes.
Yeah, they say your freshman year you gain 10 pounds.
Right.
It's 15,
Is
Reed.
it 15 now? It's going up.
Freshman 15.
Oh, it's
Freshman 15.
Oh,
That's
15.
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't partake of that club, but I can see that being an issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you lose track of your own health. You know, even if you're involved in sports, you become so engrossed in your education that it's very easy to eat pizza all the time.
Right.
And, you know, stay up all night and things like that. So we're keeping each other a little bit accountable is a good thing, right?
Yes. And so all of these programs that you've been telling us about, I think is wonderful because you have some that include lay people as well as professionals, and then you reach them on a personal level in all these different demographics at the church, at schools, etc.
Something that I've learned through my process, my own personal development and experiences, and in now educating others, is I've learned that we can give people information. We can tell them what the science says. We can tell them how to help someone make a behavior change. And these are all very important skills. But there's one thing that is so vitally important that we cannot leave out, and that is personal spiritual development. If we're not helping the health volunteer, the health worker, whoever it is, the health professional, if they are not developing themselves personally in a spiritual level, then they're going to have some challenges in ministering to the needs of others as well. You know, I like to share this story about when I was working in Guam and I was teaching wellness classes, and I would always start the program with prayer and then end it with prayer. And after one series of classes, it was a 4-week class, one of my patients, as I was meeting with her one-on-one, she came and said to me, you know, I noticed that you pray at the beginning and you pray at the end, and I started questioning in myself, why don't I do that? Why isn't spirituality a part of my daily life? And so she began reading her Bible. She said, I can only do 5 minutes a day, but you know, to me that was a huge success. And I think that when we ourselves put that into us, and you know, by feeding on God's word and his presence, and then put that out into the work that we're doing, we will be amazed at even these little things, what they will do, how they will impact somebody's life.
Do you have some verses that you'd like to share with us?
I do. You know, speaking about how we all have a different journey in life, I really like Hebrews chapter 11. The story of Abraham, you know, someone who was given amazing promises by God, and he could not really see his promises come to pass, right, for a very long time. But in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 8, starting in verse 8, it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing where he went. And then it goes on saying that in verse 9, by faith, he stayed in the land of promise. So he clung to the promise and he stayed there. But it was in a strange country. It was a place that he didn't really know much about. He dwelt in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob. When I read this, and it hit me that Abraham dwelt with Isaac and Jacob. And I started wondering, did Abraham dwell with Jacob? We know that he, of course, spent some time with Isaac, but what about Jacob? And so I began to actually go back into the book of Genesis and look and see the history of Abraham in his journey there. And what we will see in some, if we were to look at, we do have some slides on this, but if we look at a timeline of Abraham's life, it's actually very interesting what we find. And we also have a slide with all of the different verses. So what I did was I actually looked up the ages of Abraham. You know, we know that he was, 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. But you know, he was 75 when God called him. So he had to wait, 25 years to see that promise come to pass. 25 years of wandering. But Isaac did not get married until he was 40. So what was the promise that God gave Abraham?
The father of many nations.
Right?
Seed would multiply.
Yes, yes, that he would be the father of a huge nation. But for 25 years, he had no heir of promise. And then for 40 years, the heir was not even married, so he could not have children. So how in the world was he going to have this big nation, right?
Right.
Well, at 40, Isaac got married, but it wasn't until he was 60 that he had children, when Jacob and Esau was born. So Abraham waited another 20 years after his son was married. So this is, I don't know the math, 25 plus 40 plus 20. So that's a very long time to wait. But here's what's really interesting, is that we know that Isaac had twins, right? So from one child that Abraham had, there were two born. And Abraham died when he was 175 years of age. His grandchildren were born when he was 160. So he actually was around for 15 years of their life. And can you imagine the influence and the impact he had on them during those 15 years? And for him to see, these are the two that are going to bring out that multitude. Now, of course, we know that Jacob was the birthright, had the birthright. But I just thought it was so fascinating to see that God allowed him to see not just one, but a second generation. And already that was a multiplication, you know? But, you know, there's something else really interesting when you put Ishmael into the picture, because Ishmael was born when Abraham was 86 years old. So that's 14 years before Isaac. And when Ishmael was born, he had all this time with his father Abraham, but he was not the child of promise. But Ishmael, interestingly, had 12 sons. And we know how many Jacob had, right? 12 sons. But Abraham had Ishmael out of God's will. He was trying to bring God's promises to come to pass on his own strength, on his own merit, doing it his way. And he had 12 grandchildren out of Ishmael. Whereas with Isaac, he had to wait another generation. So even though the time was long, and even though he had to wait much longer, we still know that doing it God's way was the better way. Because we know of the turmoil that came because of Ishmael and his descendants too. So this just reminded me that, you know, God has a reason why he waits fulfilling those promises in our life. There's a reason why we all kind of take this journey that we don't necessarily understand. But because he knows the big picture. And this was really faith building for me, that don't try it on your own. Don't push it on your own. Wait for him to fulfill his promises.
It's so similar to the testimony that you told us of your own life, how you didn't know why, and Abraham not knowing whither he went, you didn't know why you were getting into all of these positions of administrative quality and leadership positions, but now he's allowed you to see in hindsight. That's why hindsight is so important.
That's right. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what would you say you've learned the most in God's leading?
It really is that his ways are better than my ways. And I need to remember that each and every day I need to submit myself to him.
It's a daily process.
It is, yes. And to say, okay, God, I don't know what's going to happen today, but you've really got to take this situation or this question I have, and allow him to work it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's a blessing to know that we're not in charge. I've seen so many times, how I've gone the wrong way, and I wish I hadn't. But knowing that I don't have to be in charge is a relief as well.
Yeah.
And I think even with leaders who want to be leaders, because you said, I didn't even want this, but leaders who think, it's definitely a active, very proactive quality that some people have. That's great. And it's a gift. But even with leaders who say, I want this position, for them to learn that not all of it is in their control, in fact, very little of it is such a humbling, and it's probably the best lesson for them to learn. I say that because I'm one of those people. But it really, it's the same lesson.
It is.
That is to be learned. But that dependence upon God and its total and utter surrender is, it's a priceless lesson.
Well, God gives all of us different skills and abilities. Some of us know what they are, like you. And so you're ready to go with it. Some of us, I have no idea. Lord, you just tell me what you want me to do. So God knows each of us. But you're right, the lessons are still the same for all of us.
Bringing us to the same place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Angie, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing how God has led you from the very beginning, although you didn't necessarily know where he was leading. And it's good to have leadership positions available that you're able to fill for our North American vision. We want to thank our viewers for watching. We pray that you would continue to keep us in prayer as we keep you in prayer.